in Surah Bara'a, and the other ayat that explain that ayah, وقاتلوهم حتى لا تكون فتنة ويكون الدين كله لله وقاتلوهم حتى لا تكون فتنة ويكون الدين لله. Fight them until they establish the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala, or fight them until the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala is established. Now, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanded to do that when he established the Islamic State. Before establishing the Islamic State, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanded to uphold and not to fight. Even in some cases, not to fight back. And this is the steps that we need to follow, especially Muslims in the West. Muslims in the West are commanded not to fight to establish the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala. It is not our job to do that. And even if we do that while we are minorities, then we are going against the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this has to be made clear. If we use violence in the West while we are minorities to establish the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala, then we are going against the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as many scholars said, that we are actually committing sins rather than committing or making good deeds. Why? Again, because we said that the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to Mecca, he was spreading Islam. He was spreading Tawheed. And then the next stage was that the people themselves, especially the dignitarians, when they accept Islam, of course they will change the system and they will call for Islam to be established. So here we should do the same thing. We should call people to Tawheed. And then once there is a substantial amount of people, considerable amount of people who can make a change in this country without shedding the blood of people, once those people accept Islam and they can make a change, then and then only we can establish the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala in this country according to the meaning that we have mentioned. Before, of course, who is going to put a system to stop fornication or to lash those who fornicate? Who can put a legislation to stone the adulteress and the adulterer? Who can do that? It is the lawmakers. Those who can do that are the people in charge, those who are having power. Those people, they can establish the Islamic system in its totality. Who can stop dealing with usury and riba and interest? It is those who are in power, those who are in charge. And until then, the full establishment of the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala cannot take place, and we are obliged to work towards that. I hope that is clear. And whatever we can establish from the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala in this country or in the West peacefully, we have to do so. So, for example, if they say in the West, it is up to you if you want as Muslims among yourselves to, for example, to establish the hudud, and it is up to you as Muslims if you want to cut the hands of the thieves. Let us imagine that, then we should take the matter seriously and we should think about it and think about the consequences, and maybe we can take this and establish it. It might be an obligation upon us to establish it. So the steps is to spread Tawheed among people and to try. This is the first point. The second point is try to establish as much as we can from our religion in the West, from our system, from our way of life in the West. This is the second step. In all spheres of life, peacefully, as we said. And it is up to them to accept it or not to accept it. And then, if we go by those, if we do those two steps simultaneously, in tandem with each other, then we will reach to a point. Either they will say, enough is enough and we will not accept any more advancement of your religion, and they might say, enough is enough, we will not accept any more people to accept Islam and we have to put an end to that. Or we will reach to a point where many people have accepted Islam and many people have seen the benefits of Sharia and Islam, and they will call for Islam to be established in its totality, including hudud. This is briefly the aim and the steps that we need to take in order to establish the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala in the West. Now, here there will be a discussion about spreading Tawheed. What do we mean by spreading Tawheed? And is there any other possible way other than spreading Tawheed? Here, just briefly, brothers, although you might think that spreading Tawheed is a must and is a clear issue, but believe me, many people and many du'at in the West unfortunately became confused about this issue, about spreading Tawheed. And you might have heard that some people say, no, it is not an obligatory upon us to spread Tawheed. So what do? They said, just as we said in the previous lecture, just to live peacefully with others. So what about your religion? What about your Tawheed? What do they say? They say, yes, our job is to let others to be aware of Tawheed, not to call them to accept Tawheed. And this is wrong. And none of the scholars said this. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika. What does that mean? Ud'u ila sabil. Call to the way of Allah Jalla wa Ala. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did in Mecca? What does he do during the time of Meccan period? Was he just letting the people be aware of his religion, or he was calling them to Tawheed? When the Prophet ﷺ was commanded to declare the da'wah openly, he went to the Safa and he said, Ayyuhan nas, anqidu anfusakum min an-nar. Protect yourselves from the hellfire. Save yourselves from the hellfire. Means, if you don't accept Tawheed, you will go to the hellfire. لا أغني عنكم من الله شيئا. If you don't protect yourself, if you don't accept Tawheed, you will be thrown in the hellfire. And Allah Jalla wa Ala, in the Quran, when Allah Jalla wa Ala mentioned all prophets, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ, we have not sent any messenger except to call people to establish Tawheed. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They were not commanded but to establish Tawheed. وَنُوحًا وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ. We have sent Noah to his people, أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ. Worship Allah Jalla wa Ala alone, which is to establish Tawheed. And this is what the role of all prophets. So we cannot say that